I'm a Protestant, and one of the main objections I've heard from my current faith is that this idea of the bishops in the form that we see them now weren't introduced until Constantine, and I say this in air quotes, started the Catholic Church. The idea is that they're the same as, a Baptist pastor. And same with the churches, that because, the language in the Bible is plural, referring to churches, that's the same as the different Bible churches with their own set of authority. So I'd like to see what you have to say about that.
Yeah, well, what I would say is the claim that the office of bishop did not arise until the 4th century under Constantine, and that prior to that, bishops and priests were essentially no different than Protestant pastors, is wildly unhistorical. That is something that apologists and defenders of Protestantism, those that I engage with, they would not say. I mean, they wouldn't necessarily put it all the way back to the 1st century, but they would say that in the post-apostolic church, at least in the 2nd and 3rd century, you do have this. And I would say even earlier in the 1st century, you can see this. So a few elements I might point the person towards, I would say, okay, well, what is the difference between a Catholic bishop and a Protestant pastor, or even a Protestant bishop? What is the difference between a Catholic priest and a Protestant pastor, right? What's the big difference between them? Well, the big difference is the priest is ordained by a bishop who is a successor of the apostles, and the priest has what are called sacerdotal functions, i.e., he can offer a sacrifice. So that's why in Judaism, for example, you had priests until the destruction of the temple in the year 70. But after that, the Jewish priesthood died off because there was no way to offer sacrifices. Now you just have the rabbis, rabbi meaning master or teacher of the Torah. So it's a religion of teachers, not a religion of priests, because there's no cult of sacrifice. Catholics, however, believe that at Mass, we really do represent under an unbloody form the one sacrifice of Christ on Calvary, under the unbloody form of bread and wine. So I would ask them, okay, what's the difference between a Protestant pastor and a Catholic priest? Catholic priest is sacerdotal. He offers the Eucharist. He can hear sins. He can forgive sins. Christ, working through the priest in persona Christi, forgives sins. And then I would say, all right, is there evidence of this before Constantine? And absolutely there is in the writings of the Church Fathers. St. Cyprian talks about priests hearing confession. St. Justin Martyr talks about the role of the presider at Mass, talking about how this is truly the flesh and blood of our Savior Jesus Christ. You're talking about it being a sacrifice. You have St. Ignatius of Antioch in the early 2nd century talking about how you should follow the bishop even as Jesus Christ follows the Father, how you're not a real church unless you have bishop, priest, and deacon, and they have to come from apostolic succession. Whereas among many evangelicals, it's funny, I might ask this question, how do you become a pastor? And a lot of evangelicals say, well, you go to seminary, this or that. But if you want to just start a church, I'd ask them, could I just start a church and say I'm a pastor? And they could say, yeah, you could do that. Then I would ask, well, where does the Bible say that's what you do? And the Bible never describes churches being started in this way. It always says that when someone becomes an elder, a presbyteroi, which is from where we get the word priest. Priest is a contraction of the Greek word presbyteroi, or elder. It's always from having hands laid upon you by someone else, by one of the apostles or someone they have laid hands on. So, Ryan, if you could stay on the line, I'd love to send you, I could get you a copy of my book, The Case for Catholicism, because it goes through all this kind of stuff in great detail for your Protestant friends. But that's a start. Is that at least a helpful start?
It is, and one more short question that I'd ask related to that is, when do you think the first time that a priest spoke in persona Christi was applied? Reason I ask is because I'm inclined to believe that that's what Jesus meant, whenever he said, do this in remembrance of me. But that could be applied in a lot of ways. So I'm wondering, when's the first example of this?
Oh, of somebody uttering the words of the institution narrative. This is my body, do this in remembrance of me, meaning they're offering a sacrifice.
Exactly.
Hello?
He said exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, to rack my brain going through, obviously we have the recording of Jesus uttering this in the Gospels. Now, I would say we can look at St. Paul relating this tradition in his letter to the Corinthians and talking about it being in 1 Corinthians 11, saying that if you receive the body and blood of Christ unworthily, you are guilty of profaning the body and blood of Christ. So he's relating this institution narrative and attaching sacrificial significance to it, or at least the significance of the real presence to it, which I would say follows with a sacrificial significance. Going into early church documents, I would say probably I'd have to go back and look at it. But I mean, the first comprehensive discussion we get of the Mass itself would be in Justin Martyr's first apology. But it escapes me at the moment what he says in particular about the words of institution. But I think that would be probably one of your earliest best bets there is Justin Martyr, first apology.